Tom Daley for the Observer Sport Monthly, and then later for Out magazine. This little chap, this cheeky chappy, was for a series of portraits I did called Contenders for the Observer Sports Monthly. The commission probably went on for 2 or 3 years, and I photographed probably about 25, 30 people. It's the kind of job you want as a photographer, because a magazine is enabling you to create a really nice body of work. All of the subjects were identified by the Observer Sports team as potential superstars of the future, but their careers were currently at an embryonic stage. They were just starting out. It was all about potential. Some of them went on to great success. Farrell Williams, for instance, ended up being the most capped England women's footballer. James Willstrop, squash, world #1 and world champion. Nicole Cook, world cycling champion. Shaun Murphy, world snooker champion. And of course, Ellen MacArthur, the amazing yachtswoman. In fact, this picture was used on the cover of her autobiography. Things were obviously going to go well for Tom. He'd just turned 14 when I pulled up outside the Daley home, a modest place on the outskirts of Plymouth. He'd made his name since he was 7 in the 10-metre high platform event in diving. His dad Robert had arranged the shoot, and he'd given me 30 minutes on a sunny Sunday afternoon. After a cup of tea and me talking about what I wanted and what I needed photographically, I started to set up my lights, and I paused and sort of looked out of the back window for potential other locations and saw this back garden, which was almost completely obscured by a giant trampoline. I guess Tom must have used it for training. Even at that young age, there was something about Tom. He had these dark, intense, sort of inscrutable eyes. I mean, it seemed an obvious thing to do with these sort of striking eyes to do a simple headshot. And after I'd accomplished that and gone into his bedroom and shot him on his bed with his mum, Debbie, and the wall in the background festooned with all the medals that he'd won, I decided just off my own bat to do a family portrait. I knew the magazine wouldn't run the picture, but instinctually it seemed the right thing to do. It seemed a better way of getting to some kind of a truth about the situation. The whole family were wedged on the sofa. Just Tom, his 2 brothers, his mum and his dad. An ordinary family. Then I took this picture, which I like a little bit better. The other picture was the obvious lighting from the front, where they were all clearly lit, whereas this is sort of backlit slightly and has a little bit more atmosphere to it. Like I said, just an ordinary family. As you can imagine, things were very different in our second shoot in 2015. He'd come out in 2013, and then 2 years later, he took the big step of announcing his fiancée, he was going to get married, was Dustin Lance Black. The shoot was the first portrait of Dustin and Tom after they made their announcement. So it was kind of joyous occasion. They would feature on the cover of the biggest gay magazine in the world, Out. I took along some pictures from the first shoot. I mean, it just seemed the right thing to do. And I think he was a little discombobulated. I think looking at those pictures, it made him realise how much his life had changed. It was poignant too. The original shoot had been on Father's Day, and subsequent to the shoot, 3 years after, his dad had died of brain cancer. So I was really pleased to bring the pictures along. I thought it was a really nice thing for him to have. We shot all day at this amazing location. It was kind of spooky. It was a strange place. It was an old pub and it was all falling down. You could sort of sense the history. It was there in the walls, in the plaster that was falling off them. It meant that I could indulge in creating sort of narratives. It was as though Tom and Lance were living in this place. The stylist was a friend of mine, David Bradshaw, who at the time was creative director of Versace. So he brought along all these amazing clothes. At one point, I had them outside in the cold, brutal north wind on the A13 as the cars roared past. It was effectively a motorway up against this blue advertising hoarding, wearing Versace pajamas and dressing gowns. They were really good sports. It was really good to see Tom again, and shooting him felt like cheating. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. He had that $1 million smile. It's very disarming, and beautiful skin, an amazing physique, the kind of body that you have if you dedicate your whole life to becoming a professional athlete. One of my favourite images of Tom was just him sitting on a bed, lit simply with a side window, like a Renaissance painting. There's also another shot I like where he's sort of sitting behind Lance, who's wearing a suit and is all buttoned up. And it's nice to play with these sort of gender roles and mess with people's preconceived ideas about how you should present yourself. It felt like a privilege working with this kind of beautiful, talented couple. Both shoots were shot on Canon digital SLRs, and both were done mostly with daylight. The second shoot was a bigger production number, so I did try out some other lighting, a bit of ring flash, for instance, but daylight is always best. It's funny to think the images are so intimate, but now they've become really well known, quite iconic. And if you type in my name with Dustin or Tom's, you see these pictures literally went all over the world. And it's nice to think of it as a positive representation of love. The takeaway for this is step back and don't get too bogged down in the ephemeral concerns of the magazine or whoever happens to be commissioning you. Think about how your images will look in the fullness of time. You know, be true to yourself. By all means, give the magazine or whoever it is who's commissioning you what they want, but ensure that you get something that really passes the test of time. If you think about it, the interesting pictures of the Beatles are not the album covers or the fancy posters. They're the sort of documentary pictures of them backstage with Brian Epstein or in the studio. That's why it was so fascinating to watch them recording that album. A photograph might seem sort of inconsequential when you take it, but you never know how things are going to pan out, and it could become a historical artifact or something very intimate and personal, such as the picture I took of Tom's dad, you know, that I was able to give him.